Welcome to Lecture 5 of UX203. We have researched our users, structured our content, sketched our wireframes, and validated our prototypes. Now we confront the question that separates functional interfaces from excellent ones. How do we arrange elements on screen so that users understand what matters, what to do next, and where they are at all times? This lecture is about visual hierarchy and layout, the invisible grammar that makes a design feel effortless. We are in Lecture 5. The research and structural work of Lectures 1 through 4 gave us validated content. Now we learn to present that content so it communicates instantly. Lectures 6 through 8 will refine the craft further: typography, color, interaction, and accessibility, but hierarchy is the foundation they all build upon. Visual hierarchy is often conflated with aesthetics, as though making something look good is a preference rather than a discipline. The statistics tell a different story. Users form a visual impression of a page in 55 milliseconds. Before they have read a single word, they have already judged the credibility, complexity, and trustworthiness of the interface. That judgment is based entirely on visual structure, density, contrast, and spatial organization. Pages with clear visual hierarchy retain users 3.7 times longer. Not because the content is better, the content is identical. Because hierarchy signals effort and expertise, and users intuit that the content has been curated rather than dumped. Improving visual hierarchy alone, without changing copy, imagery, or functionality, can double conversion rates. The layout is doing persuasion work that most designers attribute to the words. Visual hierarchy is created by controlling 4 properties: size, contrast, spacing, and position. Every design decision is a manipulation of one or more of these levers. Size is the most primitive hierarchy signal. Bigger elements attract attention first. The headline is bigger than the body. The call to action is bigger than the secondary link. This is not aesthetic preference, it is how human visual perception works. Contrast amplifies or suppresses elements relative to their surroundings. High contrast pulls attention. Low contrast recedes. Dark text on light background, bold against regular weight, saturated color against neutral. All create contrast that the eye resolves into a reading order. White space is not the absence of design. It is a design element. Space around an element increases its perceived importance. Tight, cramped layouts feel untrustworthy. Open layouts feel confident. The space between elements communicates the relationship between them. Close elements are related. Distant elements are separate. Users scan screens in predictable patterns. Elements placed at the top left receive attention first in left-to-right reading cultures. Placement in the primary scanning path amplifies importance. Placement in the gutter or footer reduces it. Stripe's design system is one of the most studied examples of visual hierarchy, applied at product scale. The Stripe homepage, despite communicating complex financial infrastructure concepts, achieves immediate comprehension through ruthless hierarchy. One headline, one subheadline, one CTA. Every subsequent element is explicitly secondary. The visual weight cascade is strict. Nothing competes for primacy. The Stripe dashboard extends this principle to a data-dense interface. Complex financial data, transactions, charts, metrics, is organized through consistent type sizing, grid alignment, and deliberate white space. Users can scan to the information they need without reading every element, because the hierarchy guides their eyes on a predetermined path. How users actually scan a page depends on its content density and layout structure. The F pattern emerges on text-dense pages. News articles, blog posts, documentation. Users read the first line fully, then a second line partially, then scan the left edge vertically. Content placed in the bottom right of an F-pattern page is rarely seen. For F-pattern content, put critical information in the first 2 lines. Use subheadings to create new horizontal scan entries. Do not bury important detail at the bottom of long paragraphs. The Z-pattern emerges on sparse, visually balanced pages. Landing pages, hero sections, login screens. Users scan across the top, diagonally to the bottom left, then across to the bottom right. The diagonal is where CTAs often live in high-converting landing page designs. For Z-pattern content, place your logo and navigation on the top horizontal. Put the value proposition on the diagonal. Place the primary call to action at the bottom right terminus, exactly where the I lands at the end of the Z. The 8-point grid is the spacing standard adopted by Google Material Design, Apple's Human Interface Guidelines, and most major design systems. Its logic is elegant. Virtually all modern display resolutions are divisible by 8, so a layout built on 8-point increments renders pixel-perfect at every density. The base unit is 8 pixels. All spacing, padding, margins, gaps, and component sizes must be multiples of 8. 8, 16, 24, 32, 40, 48. Buttons are 40 px tall. Cards have 24 px padding. The gap between elements in a list is 16 px. These are not arbitrary numbers. They are multiples of 8 that maintain proportional harmony as the layout scales. Columns and gutters are defined in multiples of 8. A standard 12-column grid at 1440 px uses 24 px gutters and 72 px column widths. At 375 px mobile, it collapses to 4 columns with 16 px gutters. In Figma, enable the 8-point layout grid overlay. Every element should align. Anything that does not align is misaligned by accident. The grid makes accidents visible. Wired's digital editorial design demonstrates hierarchy applied to content-first interfaces. The challenge in editorial is that content volume is high and unpredictable. Articles vary in length, image availability, and importance. The hierarchy system must adapt to that variability without losing clarity. Wired's solution: size-based card hierarchy where the lead story is always visually dominant, regardless of content. The layout uses size, position, and image weight to communicate relative editorial importance at a glance. A reader scanning the homepage for 3 seconds can identify the primary story, 2 secondary stories, and the category context, without reading a single headline. White space is the most misunderstood element in visual design. Non-designers and many product managers see white space as wasted real estate, as emptiness that could be filled with content or promotions or CTAs. Research on reading comprehension shows that increasing the margins around a block of text by 20% can improve comprehension by up to 20%. The text has not changed. The white space gives the eye room to land between reading bursts. Gestalt psychology's law of proximity. Elements close together are perceived as related. Elements separated by space are perceived as distinct. White space is the tool that communicates that relationship non-verbally. A tight group of form fields with a generous gap before the submit button tells the user, fill these in, then act. Luxury brands use white space deliberately to signal exclusivity. Crowded layouts signal discount and urgency. Open layouts signal quality and trust. The amount of white space in an interface is a positioning statement about the product. Different content types call for different spatial organization patterns. The Hero Plus CTA pattern is the standard landing page structure. Full width visual, headline, subheadline, primary action. Effective for conversion-focused pages with a single clear objective. The card grid is the standard for browsing interfaces. Consistent units, equal visual weight, scannable. Effective when all content options have equal priority. E-commerce, search results, dashboards. Master detail is the standard for managing structured content. A list or index on the left drives a detail view on the right. Effective for email clients, settings panels, content management interfaces. The dashboard pattern organizes multiple data types in a single view. Charts, metrics, tables, activity feeds. Effective for monitoring and analytical contexts where the user needs situational awareness, rather than a specific task flow. Design is not just what it looks like and feels like. Design is how it works. This principle, applied relentlessly at Stripe, explains why their interfaces feel different from most developer tools. The Stripe API documentation, the dashboard, the payment flows, every hierarchy decision is a functional decision. The layout is not aesthetic preference. It is infrastructure. On the left, a layout without hierarchy applied. Same font size throughout, no spacing differentiation, no clear primary element. The user's eye has no path. Everything competes. The result is not a layout. It is a grid of equal weight objects that demands effort to parse. On the right, the same content with hierarchy applied. One dominant headline, a visually lighter subheadline, body copy at reading size, and a clearly differentiated CTA. The eye moves from top to bottom on a predetermined path. The user does not need to think about what to read next. The layout tells them. Every layout should pass 3 quick self-tests before it moves to development. Squint at the design until it blurs. What remains visible? The shapes with the most visual weight. This tells you what users' eyes will find first. If the wrong element is most visible, a decorative image dominant over a CTA, a secondary label larger than a primary action, the hierarchy is broken. Remove all color. Does the layout still communicate hierarchy? If the primary action disappears into the background without its brand color, the hierarchy depends on color alone, which means it will fail for colorblind users and low-contrast displays. Show the design to someone who has never seen it for exactly 5 seconds, then hide it. Ask them, what was the page about? What was the primary action? What was the company or brand? If they cannot answer all 3, the hierarchy is not doing its job. Squint test. Is the most visually dominant element the most important one? If not, resize, reweight, or reposition until the hierarchy is honest. Grayscale test. Does the hierarchy survive without color? If the design collapses without brand colors, it is fragile. 8-point grid. Is every spacing value a multiple of 8? Turn on the grid overlay in Figma. Fix anything that does not align. Scan pattern. Is the layout designed for F pattern or Z pattern? And is the most important content placed in the primary scanning path? White space. Is there sufficient breathing room around every primary element? If a stakeholder says, can we fill this space with something? The answer is almost always no. Visual hierarchy is controlled by 4 levers: size, contrast, spacing, and position. Every layout decision manipulates at least one. Understanding the levers makes design intentional, rather than intuitive. The 8-point grid system is the spacing standard of every major design system. Adopting it aligns your work with the grid that developers, systems, and displays already use, reducing friction between design and implementation. 3 self-tests, squint, grayscale, 5 seconds, will catch the majority of hierarchy failures before a design goes to review. Run them on every layout before you share it. 3 questions for this session. Your team's homepage follows an F-pattern layout, but most users are arriving on mobile, where the scan pattern is different. How do you adapt the hierarchy without rebuilding 2 completely separate layouts? A product manager looks at your redesigned dashboard and says, we have all this white space. Can we put a promotional banner there? How do you make the case that the white space is doing structural work, not just sitting empty? And have you ever worked on an interface where the hierarchy said one thing and the business said another? Where the designed reading order was ignored because a stakeholder wanted their feature to be primary? What happened to the conversion rate? In Lecture 6, we move into the detail of the visual craft, typography, and color. The structural questions are answered. Now we consider what the design sounds like and what it communicates without words. See you there.